It's been a good amount of time since there's been a new episode of Weekly Takes, and I did have the excuse for a minute there that I changed jobs, which of course affected my ability to record, stream, and just create content in general. I had to adjust to the new work schedule and how everything goes there and how I was going to be feeling when I was done with each shift and whether or not I wanted to go home and make content or live stream. So that, I feel, is actually a pretty valid excuse. However, there's another excuse, which honestly is kind of valid as well, but is probably more accurate because, well, Starfield happened. And honestly, if you look at the time that has elapsed since the last episode of Weekly Takes and the release of Starfield, these things kind of coincide pretty closely, actually. So, my explanation here is Starfield is awesome. Not since Skyrim, which I put approximately 300 hours into the vanilla version of and completed literally everything except for whatever it was called, the Companions Guild or something like that, because there was a broken quest at the very beginning and I couldn't get past it even after updates. Moving on from that, I love Bethesda RPGs. I played the crap out of Fallout 3. I played a good amount of New Vegas, if I recall, but I had also just recently, within the last year or two or whatever it was, played Fallout 3, and then of course Skyrim was on this way as well, so it kind of got lost in between those. I've also played other similar games, like Obsidian's The Outer Worlds. That one's pretty good, but in some ways it was a little rough around the edges. It didn't quite fill the same niche that I was looking for when it came to a Bethesda RPG. And of course we all knew that Starfield was on the way. For years now. I've been anticipating this game for years because not only is it a Bethesda RPG, and they're kind of legendary for making that, but it's space, and there are a few things that I enjoy more than space, whether it's science, it's astrophysics, it's astronomy, whatever's going on with it. I love anything having to do with space. I mean, I love sci-fi in general. I grew up on Star Trek, and then later on there was things like New Battlestar Galactica, Firefly Serenity. So sci-fi and space sci-fi, space horror, all that kind of stuff, huge to me. So to get a Bethesda RPG that is no longer dragons and sword and sorcery, but is now spaceships and like realism in a space setting. It really feels like this could be the future of humanity in many, many ways. It's, just like Mass Effect, there would be, and Star Trek and all these other science fiction worlds, they're built to be realistic, but also predicated upon certain events unfolding. In Star Trek, you had World War III that happened, and we had to recover from that, and then, of course, we met the Vulcans. In Mass Effect, we discovered the mass relays, and that opened us up to the galactic community. In Starfield, I haven't actually unfolded a lot of the story yet, but there was certain technology that gave us the ability to travel the stars freely, and that led to colonization and eventually war, etc. And now the great mysteries that you're trying to uncover in the story of the game. That's the crazy part to me. I have something like 6 days plus worth of in-game time, which, considering I have a job and, I go to the gym and I do content on YouTube and all this other stuff, I feel like that's a significant amount of time to be putting into an RPG. All I want to do for weeks after release is come home and play Starfield. I'm like, I gotta get up and go to the gym so I can come home and play Starfield. So it's been a fantastic experience. Pretty bug-free. That's a shocking thing. The last big RPG I played was actually Cyberpunk 2077. I've commented on that before, I believe. I have to go back through my videos and look. I did a lot of walkabout videos of Cyberpunk and a bunch of smaller clips and shorts, but I love that game. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I still need to play Phantom Liberty, but Starfield is here, and so is Forza Motorsport, so that kind of took up my time. However, it was pretty flawed. There was a lot of bugs, there was a lot of other issues, missing features, etc. So it was a very imperfect, awesome game. Starfield has its bugs and has flaws, of course. I'm not saying it's a perfect game, but when you get hundreds of hours in, to a game, or it feels like hundreds of hours anyways, and for the most part, everything goes pretty smooth. The graphics are fantastic. The experience is great. It's got the core of a Bethesda RPG, but all these new things built on top of it. Space combat is awesome. Exploring is cool. So overall, Starfield is exactly the time sink I always expected it to be, and it's part of why I'm kind of behind on content. But that should be changing here now that I've settled into Starfield. I'm not having to play it 8 hours a night, and the job situation, I've become kind of comfortable there, and I've settled into that as well. So content should start coming more freely again. I've been live streaming a little bit again, and go check out Starfield if you have Xbox or PC, and definitely if you have Game Pass. Once again, we will talk about space, because why not? Space is awesome, and it's kind of infinite. Like, the amount of things to talk about, even specific phenomena. In this case, it's actually something I think is underappreciated. It's right in our backyard, and that's Mars. And we've had kind of a fascination with Mars for hundreds, if not thousands of years, but certainly in the modern era, ever since the idea that there could be canals up there, and there could be alien cities, and there could be UFOs coming from Mars to invade us. It's kind of captured our imagination for a long, long time. Obviously now, we know that Mars is, and I say this not in a way to make it sound boring, but kind of like a dead rock. There's nothing there at this point, and there probably hasn't been for millions, hundreds of millions, or possibly even billions of years. It's our understanding at this point that at one point in the past, billions of years ago, Earth was actually pretty similar to Earth, just much smaller. Had an atmosphere, had oceans, it was probably green in many areas. And then, of course, Mars couldn't sustain a strong enough magnetosphere, and it didn't have, the kind of gravity to sustain a functional atmosphere. And eventually it was a lot of that was thinned out and blown away by solar winds and just time in general, right? It all kind of faded away, and Mars became kind of a barren rock. But it's easy to dismiss it as just a barren rock. I mean, there's so much that we don't know, as I always advocate for when I talk about space and science in general. There's so much we pretend we know about, and then we consistently find things that challenge what we think we know, which is awesome. It's intriguing. I feel like that's the whole point kind of existence at this point, is trying to find something we haven't encountered yet and understand it. And with Mars, we think about this concept that nothing has probably been alive there for such an incredible amount of time, eons, time frames that we can't even truly wrap our head around. And when you look at that planet, when you look at some of the footage we get back from rovers, and you really, especially some of the high definition stuff, it looks fantastic. And you really look at it up close and you pay attention to what you're seeing. You're seeing an example of a world that has had millions or billions of years of unmitigated erosion. From the wind, from solar radiation. At one point there was water, but that predates the rest of the erosion that's going on. And it's just kind of insane to me to try and grasp that concept, because there's so many formations you'll see in the rocks and boulders and on the ground, the landscape in general, where you're like, yes, this is clearly somewhere where water once ran. You can see it in the structures of the hills and mountains and the canyons and all that sort of thing. You can tell this is somewhere where water once ran. Maybe there was an ocean here, a lake. We do still see things like landslides occur, and there will actually be water or ice that appears on the surface briefly. So Mars is technically in some ways still a geologically active world. We detect Mars quakes there. We just detected one of the largest ones just recently. And that's considering there's no visible plate tectonics we can see. But there might still be something rumbling around under the surface, which, again, these things are kind of fascinating. I want to know more about it. But many of the things around us, and I feel like this goes not just Mars. Mars is the example I'm using because it fascinates me, and I hope that space fascinates you as well. But the world around us, the universe, we take so many concepts for granted without just kind of stopping and paying attention and realizing how interesting things are if you just think about them for a moment. And so I say, like, not a challenge, but just go look at some recent Mars photography from the last couple of years, some of the high definition Mars stuff, that's something you can zoom in on and look at detail, and just look at the way these rocks and these formations look, and just realize how alien it is, how different it is, and how desolate that world is, and why that just makes it so interesting. You know, I don't think in many aspects of life that we actually take enough time to just kind of stop, think about something, and try to wrap our head around a concept, and it will kind of blow your mind a little bit. So I did address this in a short on the day of release. It seemed the most effective way to reach people at the time and be quick about it, but Mike Shinoda has a new song out there, and of course, Mike Shinoda is one of the co-founders of Linkin Park and primary songwriter, and of course many other roles. But he does have some solo work out there. The last few years he's done some producing and collaborating with other artists. Most recently he had a song with another girl that was featured in, I believe, the new Scream film. And he's had many side projects he's done. Years and years ago he did Fort Minor, which was a really cool project. And it feels like it's kind of like his outlet in the absence of Linkin Park at the moment. And even when he was with Linkin Park, he still did things as a way to kind of branch out from what he felt Linkin Park should be. Anyways, his new song, though, is very different from previous songs he's done, which had more of like a pop, hip-hop type of sound to them. In this case, this is like a rock song. And it's not heavy. It's definitely not metal, but it is a rock song. He performed every instrument in it himself, and of course produced it and put it together and all that. That's what he does. And it's a really great song. Of course, the vocals are his as well. And it's not the first time we've actually heard Mike Shinoda sing. He's done this fairly often. He did a little bit in their early albums, but especially when they got into Minutes to Midnight, Living Things was later, but 1,000 Suns, Living Things. I was saying Living Things because Castle of Glass is a fantastic representation of Mike Shinoda's singing abilities alongside Chester Bennington's. They really complemented each other very well. But in that capacity, Mike Shinoda was he did the rap aspect of Linkin Park when it came to performing. Like, obviously he wrote most of their songs and you know, had the creative vision for most of it. But in this case, he actually sings, and he wrote these lyrics for himself. Also, the song, it's called Already Over, and it's catchy. It's kind of upbeat sounding, kind of rapid, I would say. It's a good song. The guitar, of course, is something that's my favorite instrument. Brad Delson's my favorite member of Linkin Park as the guitarist. But the guitar in it's actually pretty good. Apparently, he uses the guitar that was used for recording and performing the song What I've Done on Minutes to Midnight. And of course, that's his favorite guitar. If you go listen to the song, it's very well put together, very well produced, well performed. It's a really great effort by Mike Shinoda as a nice one-off single. That's what he said it is. It's not like an album or something like that. But I watched the Instagram Live the day of release, and he said some interesting things. First of all, Linkin Park is not over. People apparently, the title of the song and the content of the song had some weird fan theories that it was a message about Linkin Park, which he said that's not what this is. That's kind of dark as well. But he did also say, I found this interesting, right? As someone who speculates on Linkin Park. He did say, in the past, I was always writing for someone else to sing. You know how someone else sings and how their voice works, and so you write things and you structure things for them, right? And so he was consistently doing that for Chester, of course, throughout his career. And the rapping and hip-hop aspects were mostly him. This was kind of the first time he's done a rock performance, solo, separate of Linkin Park, that he wrote for himself. Like, he wrote the lyrics, he structured the song, and for his voice, for how he sings things, how, I think the term he used for like how his voice wraps around things or something like that. And in my mind, considering Mike's origins, in the founding of Linkin Park, obviously he's a fan of rock, but he was very big into things like hip hop and rap and the underground rap scene back in the 90s and all that. It's really interesting to see him branch into doing solo rock work, and I feel like maybe this is an indication that going forward, not necessarily the sound of the song, because it'll be very different if he had Brad sitting there playing his guitar, because he's a very different guitar style from Mike, or if Rob was doing the drums, or there was bass, or whatever it is, Joe doing various mixing and electronic stuff. As a collaborative effort, the song would sound very different. But when it comes to writing the lyrics and writing the way it's phrased and structured, this is how Mike would write something for himself to sing, I feel like, in Linkin Park. So in my mind, this is a potential teaser for what Linkin Park could sound like vocally going forward when they do get around to a future project. And like I said, Mike's always been a fantastic singer and performer. The examples are all over the place, many of the songs, and I've posted about it. But I think that this could be a good indicator of what we could expect to hear vocally from the band when they inevitably get back together and do music. Thanks again for checking out Weekly Takes. If you enjoyed this minicast, please subscribe to the channel for more, check out the playlist for past episodes, leave a like, and if you have anything to say, any feedback, definitely leave a comment, and we'll see you next week.